Hello and welcome to Ed Talks. I'm Lisa Doolittle from the Faculty of Fine Arts, and with me today is Dr. Randy Barley from the Faculty of Sciences, Arts and Sciences, and the Department of Biological Sciences. So welcome, Randy. Thanks for coming to talk today.
Thank you, Lisa.
And
Thanks for having me.
I know very little about your background, so while we're here to talk about teaching, I think it might be helpful to just explain a little bit about your niche in the biological sciences, briefly.
I was actually hired as an instructor 3. I was the first instructor 3 to be hired in the biological sciences. They were looking for people who could do more teaching than research, and so I was, I guess, a test to see how well that would work out. So
this is, again, for people who might not know this is a kind of appointment where you're not required as part of your job to produce research. Although it sounded to me like you do research, of course.
Well, you can't put in all of those years in graduate school and not come out, I don't think, with a love of research and a passion for it. And so it's not something that I've ever wanted to leave behind.
And in the biological sciences, do you have a specialization?
My interests lie in the area of cell and molecular biology.
Cell and?
Molecular.
Molecular biology, okay.
So the extremely small stuff.
The extremely microscopes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm just wondering, you're hired as a teacher, so what made you go into teaching?
Wow, how much time do you have?
Okay, and I'm very curious because people come to teaching in different paths, right?
So I went to a small undergraduate teaching university, not unlike what ULETH would have been about a decade ago.
Okay.
And we didn't have a graduate program. In fact, we had a tiny graduate program, much smaller than here. Therefore, there were no graduate students to do the TA-ships. And so senior undergrads were awarded the TA-ships. And so I got my first taste of teaching in a microbiology lab. And it was an outstanding experience. And it left an indelible mark on me. And I realized that, working with the different students and realizing how each student is kind of as different as a snowflake in terms of their learning, the way they approach the subject material. It was really neat. And so, I was working with the science, but the learning was more of an art. And so it was kind of the marriage of the two that intrigued me. And from that point on, I knew that I wanted to do more teaching. And so I actually went on to the U of A, where I did my graduate training, and I specifically, requested TA-ships so I could do more teaching. And so my love of teaching just continued to grow at each encounter. Right.
Well, that's really interesting, and that encounter in the lab is really special, isn't it? Because you can have that more one-on-one. The students are working, right? You're not lecturing at them.
Right, it's very, very applied, which is something else I've always loved, is the marriage between lecture and lab. And 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to do the lecture and lab for our animal physiology course. And it's really neat where you cover the theory in class, and a lot of instructors or profs don't necessarily get to do that.
Right.
But you cover the theory in class, and then you have the students apply the theory in the lab. And so it's really neat. You get to take it to that next level. And it's kind of comprehensive learning or education. So, very neat.
That's great. That's a unique opportunity here, isn't it true that many times the professors are in the classroom doing the theory and somebody else is doing the lab?
Yeah,
That's more common.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. But how did you learn how to teach? I mean, you're saying that you came to a love of teaching through this practical application. You were thrust into the lab and had to assist students. So certainly learning on the job is huge in teaching, right? It's an apprenticeship profession, really.
Yes, and that was a problem. I took my first, I grabbed a master's degree, and I wanted to try my hand as a sessional. And so I was able to do that. I taught out at Thompson Rivers University. That was my first teaching gig. I mean, I knew it was kind of the marriage of, an art and a science. And I thought, I get this, I'm passionate about this, my passion can overcome, anything, and I'm willing to put the extra time in, and I will make this work. However, it was nowhere near as intuitive and straightforward as I thought it would be. Sometimes you write a test article, as part of your exam. And, some of the middle of the road students would excel at that question, and some of the better students, the way the question was written, they would overthink it, and they would end up missing the question. So I realized that there was a lot more to the teaching and appealing to the different learning styles. And so what I ended up doing is I thought, well, if I'm serious about this, and I was, I can either spend a decade trying to reinvent the wheel, or I can go back and take a few courses in the areas that I'd already identified during my teaching out of Thompson Rivers, and kind of, shorten up that learning curve. And that's what I did. I went back and I actually got an ed degree.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made a huge difference for me. I looked at education and learners and learning completely different from that point on. And I'm so glad I went back and did it.
Yeah.
It only took me a year, but it was well spent.
So can you give me more detail about that? What was it about the education approach that helped you so much? And I wonder, it might be particular because you already had the classroom experience, right? So what was it that, turned the light bulb on? What areas were important?
The first part of that really is in terms of understanding power bases. So I had no idea. I honestly had no idea. I just walked in, and my goal was to share my passion for, in this case, biology, with my students. And I was teaching from a power base of expertise. In other words, I had the knowledge, I had the training, whereas a lot of teachers will often walk in with a very different perspective. They teach from an authoritarian power base, and it's almost doomed to fail unless you can maintain ultimate control over your students, which in high school you can't do. You can't maintain control. And so it's a flawed power base to teach from, yet a lot of people and professors in universities, it's no different. They teach from that authoritarian power base. I have been given the power by the institution, now child, listen to me. Students are going to challenge that all the time. Whereas if you teach from a power base of expertise, then they will respect you because you have the expertise. It doesn't mean they still won't challenge you on occasion, but that's not their primary focus. Those that want to learn, and if you can make the science or the biology in this case interesting and fun, then they're all in. The psychology behind the teaching was profound, and it was something that I had not taken psychology courses before. And so understanding what it was to be a learner, equity in the classroom, creating a safe and caring and learning environment so that students can feel comfortable to ask questions and participate, it made a world of difference. It transformed my teaching.
That's so interesting. Because there's a lot of nervousness when you're a new teacher, isn't there? And you feel like you have to, some people I think feel like they have to grab on to that authority in order to overcome that nervousness.
That could be a big part of it. It pushes you into that authoritarian power base on day one. And, there are those that are able to teach from that type of power base and do it successfully for an extended period of time. It wouldn't fit my personality or my teaching style to have to go there. My classroom would lose something.
Right.
And something that I value. So.
Right. That's so interesting because then both you and the students are working around the knowledge itself. Yes. That's the center of the classroom, really. Yeah, interesting. How can you give an example of how that works in your classroom today? Some kind of way that you work, way that you teach that embodies that approach. That's a big word, embodies. Can you give an example of how that might work in a lecture or a lab situation?
It works in both. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less evident in the laboratory setting. Whereas in a classroom, if you're teaching the material, and there's lecturing and there's teaching, and I make a distinction between the two. what I always strive to do is teach. Lecturing, you're just stating the material. If it goes over the students' heads, that's their problem. I take ownership of that, and I try and teach, and I make sure that the material that I'm delivering is at the right level for the students to be able to internalize it and integrate it.
How do you do that?
Well,
That's hard.
So if you're teaching from as part of the psychology training that I had with my ed degree, they teach you first and foremost, create a safe and caring classroom. And so by doing that on day one, you essentially, show the students, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not looking for a pound of flesh. It's okay. We're all learning. There's tons of things I don't know. Mm-hmm. I will have to go and look up. It's okay. Then, after a few days, week and a half, all the students gradually start to come around. And even those that are quite quiet will, by the middle of the course, start asking questions. And what you end up with is a beautiful, dynamic dialogue rather than a canned lecture. And that's when and I ask a lot of questions, and that's kind of part of my teaching, right? Mm-hmm. That also allows me to keep my thumb on the pulse of learning in the classroom. So, and I'm not above going around and very, very subtly encouraging students to, answer a question. I don't usually single students out, because that undermines that safety. Mm-hmm. Some students really are not comfortable participating, and that's okay. You can see in their face, you can see in their eyes, they're with you, they're following along. They just don't want to, be in that spotlight. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And if, once the class gets that, it's incredible what you can do with a class.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very difficult skill for the teacher to understand where the students are at, because that's where teaching becomes effective, right? When you realize that learner needs thus and so at this point in time.
Yeah. One of the things I use clickers in the class. In addition to just asking a variety of kind of more open-ended questions, I'll also use clickers to enable me to be certain that it's not a half a dozen students that are with me and 50 others are absolutely lost. So I can see immediately. I look at the histogram from the clicker question and I'm like, okay, 75% of you are with me or 10% of you are with me.
Right.
And if 10% are with me, then I review the material. And I'm like, okay, so what is the nature of the problem? So, and usually I tell the students, if you haven't grasped the concept, it's because I haven't taught it well. Mm-hmm. So give me a shot, I'll do it again.
And that's obvious to the class as well, how many people have got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And these are electronic devices that the university has provided that provide anonymity. Isn't that the point of the clickers? I don't use them because I don't have that kind of a class.
Yeah, yes. So students are, there is that anonymity. And so you honestly find out what they know. If you put a small percentage of the marks, 2% or 4% of the total course marks on those clickers, then you're confident the students are trying their best. They're not just kind of fooling around and messing with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never used them, so you find that very useful.
Yeah, it's just a small, we use iClicker on campus. That's, I guess what is supported.
Is that new to you? Was that available in the high school that you taught at?
No, it wasn't in the high schools. And the thinking, I think, is that if the classroom is small enough, you will know your students well enough to know who's with you and who's not. And you really can work almost, if you've got 20 students, you can almost work in a one-on-one. You can stop and go over and kind of chat with them and what do you think about this and engage them, and you quickly find out, as you kind of walk around and talk with the students, what they've gotten, what they haven't gotten out of the material that you've covered. Whereas once you get into the, in excess of 35, 40 students, it starts to get more difficult. And when you get up to 200, it's to see your faces, right?
Now, this must be an issue in biological sciences. These are big classrooms, the beginning classrooms for sure.
Yep.
So what size of classes do you teach?
Not here, so I've taught at a variety of different institutions from coast to coast. The biggest class I've ever had is about 255.
Oh my goodness.
And it's an auditorium, and it becomes difficult to make out individual students in that sea of faces. Right? And in terms of making eye contact and talking with individual students, it's very, very difficult. And so the eye clicker allows you to essentially keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on with the learning in that classroom.
And also, I guess it keeps the students participating or active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're going to talk, at them, particularly in a monotone, for an extended period of time, students are good for they used to be good for about 15, 20 minutes. Now, given electronic devices, the attention span, I think, is shortened up considerably. And if you can't engage them, within the 7 to 10 minute time frame, you start losing them to their electronic devices.
Yeah.
And I mean, the studies have shown that, if they use an electronic device 3 or 4 times in class, they might as well not even have come to class.
These are contemporary challenges, for sure.
Certainly, yeah.
And you don't go through the thing of banning cell phones and.
Again, it's that authoritarian power base, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think you're going to dictate to them, they're paying tuition, it's their lives, you're in for a rough ride, I think.
They have to bring themselves to the class. Yeah. What is, these are things that you've been working on, but is there anything that's new to you that you're experimenting with in very recent times since you've come to the U of L? Is there, is there something you're really excited about in your teaching?
So I've long been passionate about teaching, and so as part of that, I've had a bucket list of courses that I have wanted to deliver. Mm-hmm. I've been very, very fortunate over the years at different institutions. It's enabled me to, scratch off a bunch of the courses that have been on my bucket list. One that I've yet to scratch off is teaching biology to non-majors. A problem that smaller, I can't call ULETH a small institution, but smaller institutions have, is that usually the departments aren't big enough. In other words, the faculty members in the department, there aren't enough of them to be able to cover as many courses as the department would like to cover.
Right.
So some things always get cut. Larger institutions usually have the staff, they can cover off on a non-majors course. At ULETH, we didn't have a non-majors course, and we've got students that come out of high school and they've made something else their major, whether it be business or arts, but they always liked biology in high school. And they'll tell you, I really thought it was interesting. I love the biology, and I want to take, an option, a biology option. Well, unfortunately, the only one we've got is our biology 1010. And it's quite a rigorous course because we're trying to prepare our majors for second year. And so it's a very, very steep learning curve. It's a lot of foundational stuff. And unfortunately, there's not a whole pile of time to stop and smell the roses of some of the cooler concepts in biology. And so those non-major students that end up in 1010 find it grueling. Many of them end up dropping it. And so, and they walk away thinking, oh, geez, I don't like biology. So here's a student that formerly or previously, thought they loved biology, and unfortunately, the nature of that 1010, and there's not much that can be done about it. And it's the same at every institution I've ever taught at. There's not much that can be done. And so, what we end up, what you can do is you can have a non-majors course, and you can prepare your non-majors for all of the biology that they're going to encounter in society. So this semester, I get to scratch that course off my bucket list. So it'll be biology 1850, and I'm really excited.
I'm going to tell our drama students about it. I think that's fabulous.
Excellent. It'd be great to have them.
So what do you approach in that you say that all the biology they're going to, the cool concepts, the biology they're going to encounter in everyday life?
So, I mean, if you just think about your own life, cancer, currently the number 2 killer, it's going to touch all of our lives. Yet how much do we really know about it as lay people in society? So very little. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it. How does chemotherapy work? How do you get cancer to begin with?
Yeah.
What about skin cancer? But not just cancers. Antibiotics. is another big one. Now we've always taken, we've grown up in the antibiotic era.
Absolutely.
And that's changing. We're rapidly entering the post-antibiotic era, where simple infections will start to kill many people unless something radical is done. And even then, it's a constant war that we're having with the bugs, right? And we're trying desperately to stay one step ahead of them. And that's going to be a real challenge. So talking about superbugs, antibiotic usage, correct antibiotic usage, when you go to your, well, in fact, my own research is tissue engineering. So it's taking cells and using human cells to, repair damaged tissues. So what is tissue engineering? Most people wouldn't know what that is. And yet, in the next decade or 2 decades, there'll be more and more of these type of therapies offered. And people will be wondering, well, do I want to queue up for this? Is this safe? What is this? Engineered tissues, right? So you educate them. Stem cells. More and more therapies will involve stem cells or types of stem cells. And what is that? Is that something to be afraid of? Genetically modified organisms, GMOs, right?
The food we eat.
Frankenfood.
Right.
So there's an endless array of things that are going to touch the consumer's life, and they'll be forced to make decisions. And I think it's important to have our citizens make informed decisions.
Yeah.
And I think right now there's never been a time in history where biology has been as exciting or as relevant for the layperson. And so to be able to offer this 1850 course now, I think is just fantastic.
Right. Suits the liberal education agenda so beautifully. Yeah, really, really important. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of non-majors are very intimidated because it seems to me like the science students have to get so much under their belt early on that isn't appropriate for a non-major.
No. And it's also the depth. So these concepts that I'm dealing with, you could deal with them in a 4th level, topic-specific course and go into, incredible depth. But to be an informed consumer of these technologies, you don't need necessarily the depth. A little bit of background knowledge, just a basic high school understanding of biology is really all that you need. And so that's easy, even students that don't have any biology in high school beyond, let's say, grade 10, it's easy to backfill those little, snippets and bits of information to help them appreciate or grasp the value of the technology.
So I've asked you about your favorite thing, which is really fun to hear about. What do you find are challenges in terms of your teaching, either personally in this field? I guess we'll start there. Like you've referred to a couple of things, crowded classrooms being one, and how are you dealing with them, or what would be helpful to you in dealing with these sorts of challenges that you run into in your teaching these days? Because I think that's an interesting discussion. It's a creative discussion, right? When you come up against something that's tricky, and how are we going to manage that?
Well, part of where I was going with this 1850 course is that I'm looking to flip this classroom.
Okay.
And so,
which means
it's something I've never done before. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's all kinds of issues in biology, perhaps in particular. We've got students that are destined for med school, and they have perfected a system for managing material in a standardized didactic lecture style classroom, and they are very reluctant to have that changed. So this is something that I feel I can probably experiment with in a non-majors course much more readily than I can, let's say, a 3rd year, right? Let's say an animal physiology type of course or whatever, that type of material.
And so what kind of experimentation are you going to attempt? Can you give me an example or some detail or some way that you're thinking about it?
Okay. So what I would like to do is have the students do some pre-reading. So I'll hand them they could be newspaper articles about genetically modified organisms, and then kind of have them do the pre-reading before class, and I use Moodle as well. So I can upload the documents on Moodle, have the students read them, and then when we come into class, rather than me standing at the front, droning on, we'll have discussions. And one of the interesting things with our majors, we focus on molecular or cellular processes or those sorts of things. But there's a lot more to biology than just that. There's the ethics side of it, right? And this is the type of thing that I think I can, you can have town hall discussions in classrooms, you can do the think, pair, shares. I can really get into some new territory. And I think it'll be very, very rich teaching territory. I will probably be learning more from this experience than my students will be. So yeah, I'm heading out into, I guess, perhaps thin educational ice, and hopefully it'll turn out okay, and the students will enjoy it, and I'll learn, from the first, experience, and how to, best optimize or deliver that type of course.
And it strikes me, in a larger discussion, that certainly these are issues that doctors and so medical students are going to face. We have that new right to die legislation. We have, all kinds of questions about, should I do this treatment, should I not? We have, that doctors have to learn listening, and have to learn how to actually talk to human beings, and that is really an important aspect of their education.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I agree. The interesting thing is, and I've been faced with it, many times. How do you work those elements in, those time-consuming elements in, when you're desperate to get across an entire block of material? And so it's always walking that fine line, and the ethics invariably gets cut. I mean, you can ask a question at the beginning of class for students to think about. Have you ever thought about this, or why that might be, or the value of this versus that? And then typically I get right into the material. So I haven't made the time for discussion, but like I said, I will be doing a lot of learning, and if I see enough value in it and I learn how to do it in a more sort of time condensed or succinct way, this would be something I would like to eventually take into the majors courses.
All right, how challenging though, as you say, that the mentality of the students is really somewhere else.
Yeah, well, there's different groups, right? Those students in the middle of the road, the 50s to 70s, in general, seem to prefer a flipped style classroom. Those in the 85 and above don't mess with my system. It's oftentimes
they
what
want to drive down there. Yeah. I heard about something that you did recently through the Teaching Center, which was you attended this teaching conference. The teaching days, is this true?
Yes.
Or have I made a mistake? No. And that you presented on something to do with careers in biology or careers for students who have taken biology courses. It's something to do with LinkedIn. Am I barking up a tree? I'm sorry I didn't go to the conference. I was away teaching somewhere. But Dave has told me about it, Dave Hinger.
You're absolutely correct. So everywhere I've taught, I've always had a new sort of course load. Develop, 3, 4, 7 new courses at each university I've landed at in the past half a dozen plus years. And so when I arrived here, my first year, and I hate to admit it, but even my second year here, my nose was just at a grindstone with new course development. And unfortunately, I didn't have time to get out and, gain more of an orientation on campus and get involved with the teaching center. And that's something that I kept promising myself I would do, and I kept putting off. And when I saw the opportunity to submit an abstract, I thought, okay, Randy, you got to put your, money where your mouth is. Submit the abstract, and, if they choose it, you're on the hook. You will have to go, and then while you're there, you'll get to attend some other talks, and that's a way of getting your feet wet. And so that's what I did. And so now I'm on the hook. There's no backing out of it.
Okay, we've got you, good.
Hopefully that'll be a
Yes.
regular fixture. But
They will have plans for you, I can tell you that much.
in terms of the LinkedIn, so I've done a fair bit of teaching at a whole pile of different universities, and there's some commonalities. Universities, and not just this one, universities in general, are really good at taking the students' tuition dollars, but they're not, and providing 4 years of excellent or outstanding programming. But then the students kind of graduate after their 4 years, and they kind of stand on the doorstep and wonder, what now? Mm-hmm. And they're filled with anxiety. And I can even remember, wondering myself after 4 years, or in my 4th year. So, what will I do? Will I graduate school? Will I go out and work in industry? There was tremendous uncertainty, and I had nobody providing me with any advice or answers, and it would have really. So if I could go back and talk to myself, I could provide myself with a wealth of information. And I thought, that's what we need. Mm-hmm. How do we do that? And so I thought, I teach a 4th year course. It's a seminar series, so I invited speakers in to talk to our 4th year students. And it's our capstone, departmental capstone course. I thought, how can I help our 4th year students kind of get their bearings, figure out, what do I want to do? What would be a good fit for my skill set, mm-hmm. right? Kind of career counseling, career advice. And I can try and get to know each student, and I do. Mm-hmm. Try and get to know, where they want to go, what they want to do, what they like, their strengths, weaknesses, and I will usually offer a little bit of advice, it's always welcome. They're mm-hmm. always, well, thanks for that. I had no idea. And so I thought, how can I do this on a broader scale, and perhaps a scale that, others could adopt? So a sort of formula. And I thought, well, graduates, now that I'm in one place, graduates from a program could come back and provide advice. So what's graduate school like after 2 years, 3 years? What's postdocing like, mm-hmm. After you've graduated from graduate school? What's med school, vet school, dental school, pharmacy? What are they like? And so I could rely on the expertise of our graduates.
Right.
And so I put my students, my 4th year students, on notice the first year, and I said, look guys, unfortunately I don't have a very large panel of experts yet. I contacted everybody I knew and tried to get them, to mentor our graduates, mm-hmm. Experts in a range of different fields. And it was good, but you need more people than that. You can't rely on a dozen or a couple of dozen people in a few isolated fields to have comprehensive coverage.
Right.
And so what I did is I recruited them, and so those students from 2 years ago are still providing, many of those students are still providing advice to our current graduating classes, and I think that's really, really neat.
So it's student to student. A student can just go into this LinkedIn link.
So that they join it as part of the course. It's worth 5% of their grade, right?
Okay.
Create a LinkedIn profile, find an article about a career that you're passionate about, post the article, and engage one of the experts in a discussion about that topic. And so even the first year that I ran it as a course, mm-hmm. It exceeded my expectations. It was fantastic. There was, detailed discussions, and we had one gentleman from med school come back and kind of, provide valuable insight and information into current issues in medicine. And so the students were, all of my graduating class kind of jumped in and engaged in that discussion. It was great to see it take off.
Well, I can imagine. I can just imagine how exciting that would be to a student, not to have to go through you, but to actually go with somebody who's right there on the ground. It's crazy and valuable.
And so there was some discussion at the meeting about, given that there is kind of a formula for this, could other departments kind of adopt it? And the thinking was, why not? It would work for any department.
Yeah, well, as soon as I thought of it, I thought, right, people need to hear what acting is like. People need to hear what directing, people need to hear from people in the profession, but also alternate professions. What did you do that was different than what you expected?
Yeah.
Because there must be people who have biology qualifications, even at the graduate level, who end up doing something different than expected.
Well, there's a pile of careers out there that most of our undergraduates have never heard about, that are exciting, they're great, that might better fit their skill set. But if you've never heard of them, then what do? You kind of either default into one of the careers that you do. You try and shoehorn your skill set into a career that you do know about, and it may not be a great fit. And you may be in that career, yes, you may be in that field your entire life, but you may never really enjoy it. And life is too short. You need to follow your heart and your passion and find something that you love doing.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? When you think about teaching in that whole arc of the student coming in and helping them learn and then going on to be able to apply that learning. I mean, it is a very big package, the teaching package.
Working at a university, I don't know if I can say this, but life after university, in my experience anyway, has been at least as much about who you know as what you know. You need the foundation, you need the knowledge. But oftentimes, having connections in a particular industry, you pick up the phone or you email somebody or say, hey, I'm currently looking to transition into this field or that field. And I've worn a number of different hats. From I've worked in healthcare, and I was able to network with people in healthcare, former graduate students, and make that transition in education, in biotech. And so having people on the ground, connections, whether it be references, having that kind of peer network I have found to be very, very valuable.
Right.
And so what I'm doing essentially is setting up an extensive peer network for all of our graduating biologists, so that it might not be this year, next year, could be 10 years down the road. They can find one of their classmates on LinkedIn or whatever platform exists at that point, track them down and network through them.
I think universities are recognizing this more and more through various initiatives, not exactly like the one you're speaking about, but the sort of attempt to connect to communities beyond the classroom, being really important for students, this so-called real-life learning experience beyond the, ivory tower, which, I don't believe it's an ivory tower anymore, but that universities are overtly recognizing that this is so important to learners. Have you been involved in any of those initiatives of, into the local community at all?
Yeah, having taught high school, I'm comfortable around, I've got 3 of my own kids. I've coached soccer for 5+ years. I'm quite comfortable around teenagers. There are no issues there. And so when I started here, I found out that we do this science sizzle thing. And so I volunteered for that. And so, in the last couple of years, I've covered off on the grade 7 and 8 science sizzle. So I devised different activities. One is a cardiac physiology activity. The other is an ecosystems and interactions activity. Not that that's my specialty or anything, but it's something that I've got a little bit of experience with. And so, turning people on to biology in the community.
How did you think about devising those? I'm interested in the cardio one. What drove that, and what's that about?
It's kind of like this 1850 course. There are, heart health, right? There's the number 1 killer. Okay. Why is it the number 1 killer? It's the number 1 killer because we don't really understand it, right? The public doesn't understand it. They're not educated enough to make better choices, better lifestyle choices, to mitigate those risks and offset that. And so if you give me an hour, I can give you the information that might very well, and examples that might very well change your lifestyle choices and save you from, heart disease. So it's an easy one. It's low-hanging fruit, right? It's the number 1 killer. How can I make the biggest difference in these kids' lives?
Right. So what do you do? These are in grade 7. They're just nerdy little kids, you know, what do you do to get them thinking about heart disease? They're not going to die of heart attacks. They're you know, teenagers,
No, but
preteens.
they all have grandparents though, and they all have parents. So, you know, and many of them, you know, have, you know, issues. Again, if it's the number one killer, you know, you can all, everybody can relate to it. You start off with just a few basic facts, and then you drop a pig heart in front of them. And you say, okay, let's talk about this. And so I hold up the pig heart, and they've all got their own pig hearts, and they all have a little probe. And they go in through the aorta, right at the top, and they find a coronary artery. And they stick the probe in the coronary artery. And I'm like, okay, so this is what gets blocked and what leads to a heart attack. And they're like, really? Wow. So how does it get blocked? And you just walk them through. So it's about, you know, exercise and food choices that we make. And so here, what are some good foods? What are some bad foods, do you think? And they all walk out vowing to, you know, eat better.
Having looked at a coronary artery, yeah. It's astonishing, isn't it, that actual physical thing could really spark a thought process.
Well, especially when I tell them to hold it up to their own chests, and that's not significantly different from your own heart.
Yeah, that's a really great program, isn't it, that outreach to the community.
And there's some fantastically keen kids like this past summer, doing the 7s and 8s, are some of the most talented kids that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. They were just all over the material, super, super keen.
Yeah, and these are going to end up in your classes.
I have little doubt.
Yeah. It's really good for the university and for your program, isn't it, to have that front end loading.
Well, they walk away and they're just starry-eyed with the whole, you know, biology thing and the ULETH biology, and hopefully that lasts for, you know, 3 or 4 years, you know, so that we're able to.
That
it doesn't
goal in
change,
mind.
but yeah.
So we talked about both ends now of the teaching spectrum, right? The intake and the output, into the profession. I'm casting around now to see what else there is to talk about. One of the things I was thinking about was the interdisciplinary aspect. So I'm just wondering if you've had experiences perhaps at teaching day or perhaps in your own practice where working across fields with other people on campus has been beneficial to your teaching or interesting to your teaching? Is there anything like that?
Not that I can really think of, and part of this might stem from the fact that I am still very much a novice. I mean, this is only my 3rd year here.
Right.
Like I said, I haven't had the opportunity to get out. We're actively working to change that. One of the things that's interesting, where I have gotten out a little bit and talked to other people in other departments, it seems everybody is facing it's remarkably similar issues, right? Whether it's, you know, technology in the classroom, whether it's students with their technology, which are, you know, and they're creating problems in the classroom, or just
ethical questions, as you say, difficult questions that come up.
Society is changing, and with those societal changes come new sort of instructional issues. I mean, an example is the high schools are moving, or many have moved towards a zero fail, or no zero policy.
You cannot fail. We will pass you no matter what.
And so, even if they don't hand in assignments in high school, even if they don't write exams, the teachers in many cases, can't assign zeros. Students that come through that system and arrive on our doorstep have a very different set of expectations. Well, can I make this up next week, next month? You know, can I just do something else? I don't like that assignment. I want to wait, and I want you to make up a different assignment for me. Right? Give me another chance, and another chance. And so, you know, how do we respond? Given the changes that are occurring in society, as a university, how do we deal with these? Do we sort of say, well, you know what, we need to prepare you for the work world, you know, and say, you know, we need to start introducing a more perhaps realistic system where, no, you will fail. And that happens to a large percent of our first years, and even, you know, a significant percentage of our second year students. And it's the first time they've ever faced a failing grade. They don't know how to pick up the pieces, right? In high school, they didn't have to develop the study habits because the system was very, very accommodating to them. University and the workforce is far less accommodating, and so in that regard, perhaps we're, a transition phase for these students. But how do we, as educators, respond to these changes in society or changes in public school education policy? So all kinds of challenges.
Yeah, and you're saying that we share those across campus. Right. I've found that fabulously interesting about the teaching center and about colleagues in general. As soon as you open that door, you can have very fruitful conversations about what you're facing, even if, I'm in drama, you're in biology, you think they're completely different, but the teaching issues can be similar, and there's plenty
of common ground
to share. Yeah, that engagement, that's such a buzzword, engagement of students. Like, what in the world does that mean, really, is a big one. Is actually getting getting the student put both feet in the room with you and to really be there with you.
And mentally, not just, right?
Yeah, really with you in body, mind, and soul. Yeah.
And of course, that's another change, right?
Yeah, the incredible focus on the small screen. Yeah. Some people use phones in the classroom. Of course, I don't know about that.
I guess I'm old school. That might be one of the things that I set as one of my goals to experiment with in the future.
We do so much live in my field that and how would you, in a lab, which might be similar to what we do in a studio, no, there's just no way that's a useful thing.
As an example, I don't use clickers in the lab.
No.
My lab groups are usually smaller, and it's very hands-on. I'm, from the front of the lab to the back of the lab, working on a one-on-one basis with the students.
Right.
So that would I don't think, work as well. Although there are plenty of people that are working to pioneer these types of approaches and new technologies. There's a biology leadership forum that I'm a part of, which, there's some fabulous innovators and outside the box thinkers. And whenever I sort of meet with this group, I always come back kind of rejuvenated and thinking, okay, I'll go out on these, teaching limbs. I'll try some, and these people are incredible innovators. And, they basically beta test, they share their approach, what worked, what didn't work, how they're going to change it, in coming years. And it really gives me the confidence to attempt some of these things.
Well, that's great, isn't it? That there's that support from within your field for teaching innovation. That's fantastic. And you can then share that with the rest of us.
Through these meetings.
That's right. Are there particular things that you remember from your teaching career? Is there, some stories from the classroom?
Again, I was a novice teacher. This is at Thompson Rivers, right? It's initiation by fire. And you look out at your classroom, and I see a bunch of students that just need to learn stuff. And I never gave any more thought. My job's to teach them. This is what I'm supposed to teach them. I will do this to the best of my ability. And I started teaching. And then I had one of the students, miss an assignment, miss another assignment. And I hate to say it, but you start to judge. You're like, this student is, not applying themselves, or, maybe the student is unmotivated or lazy, distracted. And your thoughts go to the negative, right? And you look at the spreadsheet of grades, and you can see, missed, and they're on the verge of failing. I'm not really a big fan of failing students, and I'll intervene. And so I called this female student. I set up an appointment with her to come and see me so we could talk about why she wasn't applying herself, and see if I couldn't find something that would motivate her to comfortably get her across that pass mark. And she came into my office, and she told me that she was dying with cancer, and she was undergoing chemotherapy. And I was like, wow, I am so sorry. I misjudged you completely. She says, I've been doing my assignments from the hospital bed. And I was like, wow. So you can't judge students. And that was one of the, first and most vibrant or strongest lessons that I'd learned, right? They all have lives. Their lives, they may have a lot more going on in their lives than just, the material that you're trying to cover with them. And so that was an eye-opening experience. And I went back, I did my ed degree after that. And of course, then they taught me a little bit more about the psychology and, dealing with students and the diversity of students that you get and being all inclusive and not discriminating in any way against any type of student, whether it's disability, color, language, illness, regardless. And so that was a really good experience for me. I kind of had the initial misstep, and then I learned why it's important not to make those kind of missteps.
Yeah, absolutely. Very moving, and a really emotional situation. Yeah, I think sometimes also people don't realize if we take those steps to understand our students that there's a lot of personal, emotional things to deal with as a teacher. It's a very, very human profession.
And I didn't get that on my first outing. And so I learned that fairly quickly. And when I went into the high school, it's interesting because having taught high school, I went to the high school classroom and I realized, they teach you about, in education, they taught me about meeting students' basic needs. And if their basic needs aren't met, they can't learn in the classroom. If they're hungry, if they're not loved, if they're, right?
Right.
And so I went in with armed with this new psychology, and you could see I could just pick out the kids in the classroom that, and oftentimes you didn't know what the need wasn't being met, but after a while you could, you talk to them just casually, or you listen to them talking to their friends, and you could figure out what that need was. And,
and in those cases, we have to turn to the bigger systems that are around us, don't we? Certainly here, the referral systems and the student support systems that are on campus. But it's that diversity of learners and your expectation that everybody has the capacity when they come to your classroom to just do the learning is you have to watch it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That your students are people.
And that really surprised me, right? Like I just assumed that everybody was kind of equal, and and it's very naive of me, but they're just here to learn, and there are no other encumbrances, and of course there aren't. Everybody's lives are incredibly complex, and more so, I think, again, getting back to those changes in society that impact how we teach or the way that we teach. The vast majority of students all have part-time or, in some cases, full-time jobs. And they have a cell phone plan that they have to pay, right? And they're on the hook. It's a monthly payment. They have to work the hours, right? And so...
They have to pay their tuition. They have to buy their groceries
things,
and pay their rent, yes, yeah.
So, I think there are perhaps additional financial challenges that students are facing today. And then they're trying to juggle school and work. They may have a very challenging taskmaster at work, and that makes for, difficulty, in their education, which is really their primary goal.
Right, and their future.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. There's a lot of considerations. Yeah, many considerations. I understand that you've been honored with an award this past year. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it was. I was nominated, or ultimately awarded, the Student Union Teaching Excellence Award.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. What was surprising to me is that somebody with only 3 years, when I first got the email notice, my first thought is that somebody is pranking me, right? This has got to be a prank, because to be a student in my class, and I feel it. I mean, even though it's only 3 years here and you know, a few years elsewhere, much of my material is being developed as I teach it. It is far from polished. I'm still very much figuring out things as I go, almost, you know, on a weekly basis or even every class or other class. What works, what doesn't, how to deliver it better, how to write better test articles. I mean, I feel like my teaching is very much in its infancy. And so it was surprising to me to find out that, you know, I'd been nominated for the award. That to me, you know, should go to people, you know, with 30 years, you know, experience. But I guess it's what I lack in experience and well-polished lectures and PowerPoint presentations, perhaps I compensate for in, you know, passion, enthusiasm, and just willingness to be there for students, you know, if they need it. I do hold the bar high in my classes because I think watering down an education does a disservice to everybody. But I also believe that I'm there for any student. You know, I will meet with them, you know, it doesn't matter. Find a time in their schedule that works. If it's in the evening, fine, it's in the evening, you know, around their work schedule. I'll meet with you. If you want to learn, I will help you learn. And I think that's probably a big factor in why I was nominated for that award.
Well, really, congratulations. It's a real vote of confidence from the people who are right there in the classroom with you. So it's a very respectable and an honor, a rare honor. So that's a terrific vote of confidence in your teaching.
Thank you.
So congratulations.